Councilor. Today is Tuesday, December 4th. I'd like to read the two dockets before us today for the record. Docket 1656, message and order approving a supplemental appropriation of $18,212,630 to cover the FY19 costs contained within the collective bargaining agreements between the City of Boston and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 718. The terms of the contracts are July 1, 2017 through June 30th, 2018, and July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2021. The major provisions of the contracts include base wages increases of 2% effective the first pay period of July of each fiscal year. The agreements also include increases to night differential, hazardous duty compensation, EMT specialist pay, and modified wellness differential. And docket 1657, message in order to reduce the FY19 appropriation for the Reserve for Collective Bargaining by $18,212,630 to provide funding for the Boston Fire Department for FY19. Increases contained within the collective bargaining agreement between the City of Boston and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 718. I'd like to remind folks this is a public hearing, both being broadcast on Comcast Channel 8, Verizon 1964, and RCN 82, as well as streamed on boston.gov/city-council-TV. I'd like to ask folks in the chamber to silence their electronic devices. At the conclusion of the the administration's presentation, questions and answers from my colleagues, we'll take public testimony. There is a sign-in sheet to my left by the door. I ask that you state your name, any affiliation and residence, and please check the box if you do wish to testify. I'd like to just clear one thing up. Docket 1657 will transfer the funds from the collective bargaining reserve to the general fund, and docket 1516 will authorize the funding for this agreement. I'd like to introduce my colleagues in order of their arrival. To my close right here is the Vice Chair of Public Safety, the Chair of Public Safety, Councilor Tim McCarthy. To my left, at-large City Councilor Michael Flaherty. To my far left, Councilors Ed Flynn, Councilor Matt O'Malley, Councilor Anissa Sabi George, Councilor Andrea Campbell, and to my far right, Councilor Frank Baker. I'd like to recognize in the chamber today, we have the president of Local 718, Rich Paris, and I'd like to just recognize all the great men and women who work for our Boston Fire Department, including the bargaining team and the executive board. So thank you all for your attendance today. And with that, I will hand it over to the administration for a presentation.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Siomo. Good afternoon, Chairman Siomo and members of the City Council. My name is Emma Handy. I'm the Chief of Administration and Finance for the City of Boston. I'm here to testify on behalf of the two dockets before you today. These dockets appropriate for the second year of the contract. The dockets represent the culmination of a successful negotiation with Local 718, the Firefighters Union, which will result in a 4-year contract that offers stability for the city's financial planning and certainty for Boston's firefighters. In addition to the wage components contained in the contract also includes many language changes, including updates to include clarification around opioid testing, the addition of paid parental leave to employees of 718, and an update to the anti-discrimination clause that aligns the contract with current law and current city practice. I will turn it over to the city's budget director, Justin Starrett, to review the status of the city's FY19 collective bargaining costs.
Thank you, Emma. Good afternoon. Thank you, Councilor Shiomo and councilors, for having us here today. As Emma mentioned, my name is Justin Sterrett. I'm the city's budget director. Dockets 1656 and 1657 are appropriation orders that cover the FY19 costs of the collective bargaining agreement between the city and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 718. The $18.2 million reserve draw will be distributed to the fire department to cover the costs in FY19 of this contract. As you remember, the FY19 budget passed by this council included $38.4 million in aggregate to cover the entire collective bargaining reserve for the year. So far in FY19, this is the 9th supplemental collective bargaining appropriation to come before the council. The City Council has previously passed appropriations for Teamsters, Park Rangers, Municipal Police Patrolmen and Superiors, BPS storekeepers. Actually, just yesterday, the Ways and Means Committee held a hearing on 2 other collective bargaining agreements for the BPS Admin Guild and PHC SEIU. If those appropriations and the one under consideration for today are approved by the council, the remaining balance in FY19 reserve will be $18 million. With the completion of the 2 contracts yesterday and the contract today, this will bring the total city agreements that the city has with unions up to 78%, something that we're very proud of to get so far along the line. But to get into some of the details of today's contract, it includes both meaningful compensation and meaningful language changes that Emma mentioned. On the compensation side, we have 2% wage increases starting in July of the first year and continuing throughout, which is consistent with the pattern set by both our city unions and our public safety unions. Outside of the base wage, there are adjustments made to some differential wages like hazardous duty, night shift, EMTs, holiday pay, and a new wellness differential. On the language side, as Emma mentioned, we have several notable changes, including clarification to drug testing policies, the paid parental leave that Emma mentioned, updates to the anti-discrimination clause to include all protected classes under state and federal law, modified use of personal and vacation benefits to ensure better management and coverage by the department. And as Emma mentioned, we are proud of this contract. We believe it's a fair and successful negotiation with mutual benefits on both sides. And I'm happy to answer any questions along with Emma about the contract itself.
Great. Thank you, Justin and Emma. Can you give us the number in the collective bargaining unit? Number of folks?
Members?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, let me pull it out.
It's a little bit north of 1,500, I believe. We can get you the exact number.
Yeah, 1529 as of this morning.
Okay. And we'll have, you mentioned 18 million left if these 2 are approved tomorrow at tomorrow's.
Tomorrow and this one, yep.
Right, for the other 22% that are not under agreement right
Right,
now.
that's more of a reflection of the total units themselves,
Right.
not necessarily the members. We think that while we have sort of outstanding negotiations with some big unions like EMTs, librarians are out there, and obviously the Boston Teachers Union is still out there. We are sort of in diligent negotiations with all those groups, and we're not sure where they'll exactly land, but we think there will be sort of a fair amount of money left for those groups at the end of the day.
Great. Since we have a good group of folks here, let me recognize Councilor McCarthy for any questions.
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'll be very quick. You know, another congratulations on coming once again. Collective bargain agreement sitting down before us, no nonsense. Operations are taken care of, families are taken care of. You know, I want to welcome Boston Fire Department, clearly Richie Paris and the executive team. I really have no questions. I'm happy that they're happy, and I look forward to voting in the affirmative tomorrow.
Thank you, Councilor McCarthy. Who's next? Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Echoing the comments of the Chair of Public Safety, we'll plan on supporting this. Want to take this opportunity to address a couple issues that really date back to the previous administration, specifically when they get rid of the 2 chief cars. I know West Roxbury, my colleague, Councilman O'Malley's district, with the high-pressure gas line that's in his community. We don't have a district chief. We also, I don't think, have one over at the Longwood Medical and the hospital area as well. So we have a situation, if we ever have a situation that, like the disaster up at Merrimack Valley, and or something that happens over in the Longwood Medical, our hospital areas, where we're at a huge disadvantage right out of the gate, particularly if there's multiple things going on at the same time. So I know this contract doesn't directly speak to that, but I will speak to an increase in Boston's population, particularly in South Boston. I'll speak to the need to have a fire district down along the South Boston waterfront. And I'd like to see at some point us addressing the cutbacks from the previous administration that have put our city in a predicament in the event of something like a gas line break. So moving forward, as we head to the budget season, if we could keep on your radar screen, a fire station on the South Boston waterfront, along with restoring the cuts to the two district chief positions. That would also go a long way in fostering additional diversity throughout the ranks of the upper echelon of the fire department. So it's a win-win-win, but first and foremost, public safety. And the fact that those two district chiefs were eliminated and they haven't been restored is it's problematic for me to be here, and particularly if you're a district council from West Roxbury or a district council from the Mission Hill Longwood medical area. That would be of major concern to me and to the people I represent over there. But I'm coming at it as an at-large council, so I represent the whole city.
Sure.
So if you could maybe dig in a little bit on that, work with the mayor, work with our fire commissioner, and
Sure.
And the president of 718 and the members to learn a little bit more about it. But that's a big issue. I don't want to compound it with this here. This is a great day when we can get to the table and the city can bargain with our firefighters, which is great. So I'll be supporting that, but I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity, as you two are bean counters for the city, and we'll be in budget season before you know it. And it pertains to our public safety, pertains to the fire department.
Sure.
And the time has come to have a very frank conversation about having a fire station down on the waterfront, as well as restoring the cuts to the previous administration in those two district chief positions. So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo, and I also agree with Councilor Flaherty as the District 2 City Council representing South Boston. I spend a lot of time at the South Boston waterfront, and the population there continues to grow and grow every day almost. I spent some time there this weekend for the commissioning of the Thomas Hudner Navy ship, and thousands and thousands of people. But you know, what's our plan maybe over the next year, over the next couple of years? You know, can we at least have a conversation about adding a district down at the South Boston waterfront, or adding a major presence down there? I think that would be, you know, in the interest of public safety, would be critical.
Yeah, I think we're happy to have that conversation as part of the capital plan in the upcoming cycle. It's something that we struggle with a little bit with the jurisdiction issue. I know that's not with fire, but it's something that with the growing population and a sort of mixed, for lack of a better word, dynamic of who owns what property down there, it's something that we're working closely with, and we will certainly circle back with the commissioner and think about what we can and should be doing in the capital plan for next year.
Thank you, and I also, you know, I'll be supporting voting yes tomorrow. One story I'd like to mention is I had the opportunity to serve for 25 years in the U.S. Navy and served overseas. And when I came back from the Middle East, I was enrolled in something called the Gulf War Registry, and it tracks your health for being in certain countries in the Middle East. And a lot of people in the military have these respiratory issues leaving the military or during the military, but I think it's similar to people in the fire department. They serve so many years fighting fires, and they have all these health-related issues that develop year after year. I think short-term and long-term, you know, maybe we can continue to have a conversation about the health risks and making sure that our current firefighters, but also those that are retired, also have the health care and the compensation that is necessary for them to live. I know a lot of firefighters, unfortunately, almost after they retire, they've been in fires for so many years that their life expectancy is not very long after that. So is that something we could also continue to have a conversation about?
Yeah, I would say there are a few things more important, I think, to the mayor and the commissioner than the health of firefighters. I'd say we have prioritized investments both on the capital side and in the operating budget. And frankly, in this contract with a new wellness differential that'll actually help support firefighters to make sure that they are taking care of themselves and they are getting the sort of medical services that they need. This is everything from, targeted firehouse cleanings to make sure that the vents and the ducts and the gear and the bunks are all in a place where they're not, with those contaminants, they're not facing those types of health concerns. And that's something that this mayor and the commissioner are committed to continuing to fund, and we look forward to seeing what more we can do in the sort of upcoming budget cycle to make sure we're providing for that level of health care for our firefighters.
Yeah, thank you. And as I mentioned, I'm looking forward to voting yes tomorrow. I think that's the way you conduct union negotiations, is through the collective bargaining process. I want to thank the City of Boston, the Fire Department, Local 718, Rich Paris, for their professionalism. And I want to say thank you also to your team for being there for the residents of Boston as well. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flair. Did you?
Just a
Point of clarification.
Actually, a great place to start would be on the 9th floor at the BPDA. They own a lot of land down there between the BRA and the EDIC. A lot of it's undeveloped, but it's right down in the Ray Flynn Marine Industrial Park. Be a great location for a brand-new state-of-the-art fire station.
Sure.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a wonderful thing to come as we discuss a significant union contract that has been agreed upon mutually through, I think, respect and a willingness to listen by both sides. So you all are credit, as are the men and women sitting behind you, and particularly Local 718 President Rich Paris. Thank you, Mr. President. Very few questions. Just you went over this, but I didn't get all the notes. So how much should we vote favorably on this $18,212,000? How much will be left in the collective bargaining reserves?
18 million.
So it's about half.
Yeah, so there's 38 million in it right now. There's 18 million in this contract, and there's about a little bit south of 2 million in the contracts that we discussed yesterday.
Yesterday, perfect. The Public Health Commission and BPS. Okay, so how many unions are outstanding?
I don't have the number of unions, but I think I mentioned it before. It's about 78% of the contracts that we're done with right now. From a membership point of view, the three big ones that we think about are BTU, obviously.
Yeah.
And then librarians and EMTs are the other two big groups that we have out there that have a fair amount of members. We can get you the exact numbers.
So 78%, you're done with 78% of contracts? How many members are in the BTU bargaining?
I think more than 5,000.
Okay.
It's the largest contract.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So,
And then I think,
but don't we have about 20,000 employees? It seems. I believe you. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the math.
I think that's just
here.
city employees. I think when you include BPS, it's closer to 25.
Got you. Okay. So will we have enough to satisfy those outstanding contracts?
That is a great question. We've not gotten far enough along the process where we feel comfortable one way or the other, but we do our best to budget for it accordingly. We think we have a very fair contract with the unions that we've settled with so far, and we're going to approach the next phase of negotiations with that same openness and fairness in mind. We have a pretty set pattern that is been set both for the public safety unions and the city ones, and we can't predict the future, but we think we'll get pretty close, if not all the way.
Okay, well, that's heartening to hear, and I agree with you. I think you and your team have done a fantastic job as it relates to this. I guess if we're talking about an outstanding union with 5,000 members and $18 million, the math there wouldn't seem like it would get us to a...
some of it has something to do with when the contracts have ended too, right? They're not all equal in terms of how much of the contract we are sort of owed when they are ultimately one contract ends and the negotiation finalizes. So oftentimes there's a gap between when the contract has ended and when the new negotiation ends and we fund the new contract. That gap differs depending on the union, and so the sort of amount that you're funding.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but hasn't BTU membership been working without a contract for a number of years?
Actually, a year ago at this time, in a very similar circumstance where we used part of the collective bargaining reserve and actually part of new growth at that point to pay for the BTU contract as of last year. So they've been out since the beginning of this fiscal year, but they had 2 contracts up until then.
But this, so should you settle, God willing, with BTU, it would just be, you'd be on the hook for 1 year
I think it's
before the new collective bargaining reserve and the new budget would go into effect?
yes.
Okay, again, this
Yeah, no, you're
is off topic, but I think it's one of the things that I'm asking myself. Okay, and then so this works out to, the collective bargaining unit of the VFD that we're discussing here is about 1,500 folks, 1,529. So this works into about a 10,000 per person, give or take, increase in salary, recognizing a whole host of factors. That's just
Yeah.
the simple math of dividing
There
18
are a
million
whole
by
host of
50.
factors. Yeah, I'd say from a wage perspective, it falls very much in line with the rest of the public safety
Yeah.
unions. But there's a whole host of the differentials that apply to different segments of the membership that
Okay.
it would be hard to say exactly 10,000 per member, but
No, understood.
Yeah.
But I did that with yesterday's, and it's not, the amount and the percentages, I'd say analogous to what we're doing in the Public Health Commission administrative staff, which is slightly higher than the BPS administrative staff. I may have that backwards, but you understand where I'm
Yep.
going with that. And then there was an issue I remember with our last union contract with, I think it's called the TCAP, which every time the contract is negotiated, is that factored into this as well?
yep, that's factored into it.
Okay, and that's 1 percentage point or half a percentage point?
Ooh, man.
It's fine, but as long as that's included in this amount?
It is.
Okay, and that's just something we have to be mindful of as we talk about other, particularly
Absolutely.
public safety unions, that can be a factor as well. Well, that's all the questions I have for now. Again, I will be supporting this and appreciate the work that you all have done with the men and women of organized labor to come up with a fair contract, so thank you.
Councilor Sabi George.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for being here today. I see one of the language item adds has been the added psychiatrist to the list of independent medical examiners for injury on duty claims. And we had a fairly long hearing yesterday on mental health services in the city of Boston. And one of the items that we discussed in length is how we as a city support our employees, both in fire and EMS and BPD in particular, to their work experiences and sort of the impact of the work on their mental health and the support that we need to give them as a part of their work. Can you talk a little bit about what that means with adding psychiatrists? Is it greater access to mental health services?
Sure. So I can give you a brief overview. I know there are folks from the fire department here as well, so that they can correct me if I
Great.
do too brief of a job and don't explain it accurately. So this pertains specifically to members who are injured on duty, and when there is a disagreement between the sort of medical professionals on staff at the fire department and the personal doctor of the member who might have been injured on. And when that happens, they go to an IME, and there is a sort of decision by the independent IME about sort of which
An IME is independent medical
examiner. That's right.
Okay.
I'm sorry. And what this really means is that basically, in addition to the orthopedic doctors and generalists that currently are sort of authorized to function through that IME process that we have today, that we've added the additional layer of having a psychiatrist also available to sit on an IME, so that they could be available for something like a PTSD diagnosis, or whatever it may be, if it was in a situation of injured on.
Great. Okay, so it's not quite what I thought it might be, so I appreciate that clarification. Is there any effort to increase the amount of support services available to the men and women of the fire department?
So there is, through the department's EAP program, the city has an EAP program, obviously the department has their own EAP program. There are a number of resources available to firefighters through that program, and by connecting with, I think, BFD's HR department and resources that they have there, they can link with referrals or specific psychiatrists or what have you.
Great, thank you for that. What we have, I don't think, is ever enough, so making sure that we, as all of our work continues across departments, that we're properly supporting our employees across all districts, not just fire. And then I see the incremental increases for EMT stipends. How many EMTs do we have, or how many firefighters are EMT certified?
I believe it's about 2/3, is that right?
Yeah, it's about 1,000 of
Yep.
the 1,500.
Yep, so these are firefighters with the EMT certification.
And I know at some point there was some difficulty in allowing firefighters who were also EMT certified to do offer additional care to a victim or to someone we were responding to after a 911 call. Have those changes, have we seen changes in
I
practice?
don't know. I might kick that to the department. I don't know if they have any thoughts on the changes to that policy, but
I
there's
think at
nothing.
one point firefighters weren't allowed to administer Narcan, for example.
I don't believe that's spoken to directly in the contract, but we can certainly check with the department and see if that's changed from a policy or management perspective. Sure.
I want to make sure if we've got men and women that can provide the services that one of our residents needs, that we allow them to do that and recognize their areas of certification and their ability to do so. So I think for a while if it was a response to a substance use overdose or where Narcan would be of use, all our firefighters were allowed to do was supply oxygen and hold the individual's hand, as opposed to administer Narcan. So I'd like to understand whether or not that's changed over time. Has that changed over time?
That's part of our curriculum, and that's part of our basic services now.
Excellent. I'm really happy to hear that. And as, services change, make sure that we're able to, we have a very professional firefighting department, and that they are qualified to deliver certain services, and 2/3 are EMT certified, that they're allowed to do those things. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo, and thank you, Emma and Justin, for your hard work on this. And of course, thank you to Commissioner Finn, who is in here, and his incredible team, as well as Richie and Local 718 for their hard work, and frankly, being mindful of all the other departments and bargaining units as well, and the obligations of the city with respect to those departments. So thank you. Just to highlight, the paid parental leave, this is all great stuff. But a couple of things. One thing that was mentioned was sort of the new district, and Councilor Flaherty and I have talked about this quite a bit. He cares deeply about this, even when I was chair of public safety before Councilor McCarthy took over, as well as, the police department talking about a new academy. So I'm just curious, even if it were to go into the capital plan, how long would that take?
I'll take a stab at that. A Capitol building, very complicated process that takes a lot of time. What I would say, though, is I think both on the police side and the fire side, when it comes to services in South Boston, especially the Seaport, both Commissioner Evans and Commissioner Gross and now Commissioner Finn, I think, spend a lot of time and a lot of resources making sure that they have the right staffing levels around that area to make sure that they can respond to the calls. And I think the mayor, through the help of the city council and the work of the city council, has continued to invest in increasing the numbers of firefighters and police officers to make sure that we can respond to those. So I don't have a great answer on when exactly we would be able to build something like that, but we are prioritizing stuff in the meantime to make sure we can be as responsive to incidents as possible.
I just want to sort of echo, I think, what Councilor Flaherty was talking about with respect to sort of these new investments for public safety agencies. Obviously, they work quite a bit. Additional investments in wellness, and in their wellness in particular, given what they see day in and day out in the work, is extremely important. I've been saying this for some time, don't give all the monies that we have to the school district. Frankly, we got to think critically about the incredible need of our other departments, including our public safety agencies, and how we adequately resource their needs as well. So striking a balance, but it's something I'm sort of attaching myself to, some of these requests from BPD as well as the fire department of things they think are absolutely necessary for them to do their work really well. So just wanted to put that on the record. I also care deeply about sort of the diversity work and the numbers that the department's been talking quite a bit with folks at BPD, Chief Hooley, as well as Commissioner Finn. We don't always agree, but everyone's always willing to come to the table because they see the importance of making sure that our agencies reflect the demographics of the city of Boston with respect to women and people of color, and ensuring that there are pathways for folks to become, well, pathways particularly for those who are born and raised in the city or who live here, to become firefighters as well as police officers and EMT. So it's important to me, and I'm putting that on the record as well, but also wanted to thank the department and Local 718 for showing up to that conversation, as well as you guys. I plan on voting for this just because it's fair, it's reasonable, and obviously it reminds me of the conversations I didn't have to actually be a part of before I joined the council and the public safety agencies and the overtime and all of the, taking too much money, it's too high. So, it's been a lot easier since I joined the council, and I really do want to applaud those who came to the bargaining table wanting to work it out there versus here at the council. So I wanted to go on record saying that too. So thank you for your hard work on this, and your incredible teams. Thank you, Councilor Siomo.
Council Baker.
Yeah, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's all right, nothing wrong with that.
It's been a long day. What does a firefighter make? Like, you come in the door, you're new, no night differential, like what is a base wage?
Base salary.
Yeah, sure. So base pay for a first-year firefighter is about $70,000.
Okay. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about, you had some language changes here. It says modified use of personal and single tour vacation benefits. What is that?
Sure. So on the single tour vacation, this allows basically everyone to take one, so let me back up for a second. The current contract allows everyone to take 1 week of single shift vacations. It used to be that
So you can
prior
take
to
one day at a time
well,
for 5
one shift at a time, which is now a 24-hour shift in terms of how you take, in terms of how a shift is calculated.
So that shift is actually, that 24-hour shift would be counted as 4 vacation days, 8, 16?
No, sorry, that's
4,
one.
3?
So typically a firefighter works 2 shifts a week, which are 2 24-hour shifts.
Right.
And so prior to this contract, the contract said that after 5 weeks of vacation, you could take the 5th week of vacation in single tour increments rather than having to sort of schedule out the entire week of vacation. And this contract extends that benefit to basically without the sort of cap of the 5 weeks. So it really is just additional flexibility for firefighters to take time as they need it. It's not an increase to the time in this regard. It's just sort of additional flexibility around the time that they can take.
Can they take all 5 weeks in like?
Just 1 week of incremental.
Just
right.
1 week,
Yes,
oh,
sorry.
okay.
The 5 weeks refers to the sort of, it used to be that you had to get to 5 weeks of vacation. Now you don't have to do that. Now you can take it, the 1 week.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about, it says fire inspections, all inspectors shall be conducted by bargaining unit personnel except for the department's engineers may also, is that something new engineers can do inspections now?
Believe the part of that is new is the part that sort of protects the existing positions in terms of them being within 718.
Say that one more time, I'm sorry.
So I believe that part of that language that is new is that basically those positions are sort of codified as positions that will remain in 718 and will not be turned into positions that are exempt positions or outsourced or something like that. The fire inspection, yep.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about in section, in my handout that I have, section 4, but it's Article 6, I believe, hours of work and overtime. It's talking about 1/2/1/4 configure. Can you just break that down for me, what that actually means? The changes.
Sorry, let me just look at it quickly.
Is that the change that we had talked about with the single tour vacation? That doesn't have to do with the single tour vacations, does it?
Not yet.
So it's slightly different. So this is for personal leave, essentially. This is codifying their structure of how the shifts are allocated out. But then we did make a change to the personal leave, which was they used to have 4 tours and they could use them in different increments, including a 14-hour tour, which is part of the shift. We're going to a 24-hour tour. And we want to, and working with the department and the union, to have the firefighters use them in 24-hour increments instead. And this would have amounted to a kind of a loss in personal time, but it actually, we increased the total number of tours we were able to take off.
So they could take a 14-hour tour off.
Yep.
So now we're mandating they take a 24, so like if somebody doesn't want to take
Right. So
3 days off or something, they have to take that off?
this is really just standardizing how time is used into those 24-hour increments. And by doing that, because the increments did not neatly fit into 24 hours based on sort of what was in the prior contract, we needed to both increase the amount of time that was allocated to this particular benefit and make clear in the contract how those hours sort of flowed throughout. So it's clarifying that everything's taken in 24 hours, and it's also increasing the amount of hours in P-Tours to three 24-hour shifts instead of, I forget what the exact number was, but it's something like 56 hours as opposed to 70-something hours. So it's a small increase in the number of hours that are allocated and also standardizing into the 24-hour block.
So this is scheduling language. This helps the administration with scheduling?
Yeah, it's continuity of the fire teams to,
Yep.
make sure
And a
they
small
cover.
increase in time given to firefighters, yep.
Okay, and I just want to echo everybody else. I wasn't in this role, but I was in the city when the negotiations, the way some negotiations used to go, and this seems to be a lot better, so thank you, and I will be voting in the affirmative tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
It happened around 2013, I think. Councilor Flaherty.
Just a follow-up question more on the medical side, and I think it's a broader discussion for all city departments. If we could get chiropractic services put on the formulary, it's currently not covered. Situation as it pertains to a firefighter, bends down to tie his shoe, can't get back up. Normally, if he could go get a chiropractor and get what they call an adjustment, he could probably be back to work that day. Instead, it's banging sick, call the ER, call your primary care, go to a specialist, get prescribed either Flexerol or some worse pain medication, and you're out for weeks, if not months. When if we just had chiropractic services available on the city's formulary, they could just go to the local chiropractor and get an adjustment and be back to work. It just defies logic from just a dollars and cents perspective. So not quite sure what the holdup is, but I can tell you that hundreds, if not thousands, of city employees, I'm not one of them, use chiropractic services, but I do know people who do use chiropractic services, and they work wonders for folks, and it cuts out this whole process when they just need an adjustment, and they could go right back to work. But without that adjustment and dipping into their own pocket, they have to go, they got to slow dance it. And the slow dance, it starts with the ER, then goes to your primary care, then goes to your specialist, and then just put that aside, and then let's just talk about opioids for a second. And we talk about how we struggle with that as a city, and you start messing around with pain meds, and it can go downhill pretty quick. So no bueno, both of them. So if we could just get chiropractic services for all of our city employees, I'll use this as an opportunity to plug for it again, and I'll be talking about it during the budget season. So telegraphing a couple of my punches here.
No, that's very helpful, and it's interesting. We are sort of nearing the end of our current PEC agreement on the health insurance side, so maybe that's something we can bring to the conversation.
Yep. We bring a lot to the table. We have thousands of folks and their families, so one would argue that we have the bargaining power to get that. I understand what the resistance is on some fronts, but we shouldn't be believing the hype. People use it, it works, and it gets you back to work a lot quicker. We should be looking at it, so thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo, and I just wanted to follow up on what Councilor Flaherty talked about, is on sick time and health, just something to consider for the next, during the next budget process. For returning veterans, maybe we could consider having a part of time, like sick time, but you wouldn't use it, you wouldn't call it traditional sick time, but it'd be for city employees that have to go to the VA for an appointment, that they can use a certain part of military or sick time specifically for VA appointments. sick that wouldn't be used or accounted for from the traditional sick time. You know, there's a lot of veterans that are in our city departments, and I think we may want to consider giving them a better opportunity to use a different part of time that they can go to their VA medical appointments. Is that something you'd consider?
I think that's certainly something we could look into and talk to the Veterans Commissioner about. I think as it pertains to city employee leave and the benefits associated with collective bargaining agreements, we have to consider what is currently in the agreements, right? And so if that was something that we wanted to start to think about and scope out, we would have to sort of think about it on a phased approach as agreements come up.
Because I always thought that, you know, someone that's sick and takes a day off and someone that's a city employee that has to go to a VA appointment, that shouldn't be used, that shouldn't be a personal leave or a vacation or sick time. It should be a different part of time for their service so that they can go to their VA appointments. Sure. So that's something maybe hopefully we can talk about during the budget process.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Council Campbell.
Thank you.
I only wanted to quickly add the chiropractic services point that came up during the last budget cycle. There were a lot of council employees that use those services that also have been sort of asking questions around why can't it be covered in some way versus just using your FSA account or coming out of pocket completely if you don't do FSA. So just wanted to say, you know, be nice to, even if the answer is ultimately no, because of whatever reasons, that sort of be resolved during the next budget cycle, because it's come up quite a bit. So I just wanted to echo that. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Sion.
Thank you. So that concludes this portion of today's hearing. Sam, did you want to testify? Do you want to come down? Anybody else? Nobody else? Okay. I don't know. See the pins? She's got great legs.
So for the record, Mr. Chairman, my name is Sam Tyler, President of the Boston Municipal Research Bureau. And I'm glad to be here to comment on the contract, and I'm glad we're talking about a negotiated contract and not a binding arbitration agreement that we have to deal with. So I think that's all positive. I would like to just start with sort of reacting to a comment that was made in terms of really what I took as what's really the role of the City Council with contracts that are negotiated. You're not part of the negotiations, that's the administration and the unions, but the City Council has a very important role in this process, and that is as the appropriating authority to thoroughly evaluate the provisions of the contract, the cost of the contract, its sustainability, and determine whether it should be approved or not. It's not that the council, because it doesn't have a role, shouldn't pay attention to the issues and making sure that it is a fair contract for the taxpayers as well as for the employees. And with that, we've been talking about the supplementary appropriation, which is really for the second year of a 4-year contract. So I'd like to talk about the full contract in terms of what this entails. And I've testified at previous contract hearings, and some of what I say here I've said before, particularly in terms of compensation creep. But this, as a 4-year contract, this is a contract that will cost the city about $95 million. So the 18 is just for the 1 year. There's a retroactive there's reserves for, but then there's still fiscal 20 and fiscal 21. And what I find interesting is that if you break down the cost, the general wage increase of the $95 million, so the salaries, which is, as with other contracts, 2% a year, which sounds very reasonable. But what's of note is that that wage increase represents less than 50% of the total cost of the contract. So it's really the other issues, the night differential, the hazardous duty differential, the EMT specialist pay, which doesn't apply to all firefighters, but the first two do, the wellness change, increase in holiday pay, and then a situation of out-of-grade pay for senior lieutenants and senior firefighters when the captain's on vacation. That's not a big amount, but altogether, that comes to about $82 million. So that, and then on top of that, because the salaries are going to increase, overtime is going to increase, and that's a factor that's built into the cost as well. And so for a $95 million cost, it's about 46% of that total cost is just the salaries. So, you know, the concern is in terms of all these other items that add to the cost of the contract and, you know, the ability to be able to support that. There's also going to be an increase in cost to those who are required to pay detail. Because 30 days after the city council approves this contract, you know, the amount of the paid detail increases by $2 an hour, and then what is now typical of the police officers after 4 hours. So it's just, you start off with a mandatory 4 hours of paid detail. Any time after the 4 hours becomes 8 hours. And that's a new feature of this contract. So this will be a more expensive contract to, you know, the taxpayers who use those services. There are some, you know, there are, as has been mentioned, you know, there are good language changes as well. You know, the paid parental leave is consistent with all the other contracts. The personal leave shifts, combine that into 24-hour increments. I think that's a management improvement, as had been already noted, in terms of continuity of fire teams. The psychiatrist that could be available as part of the independent medical examiner. The expansion of drugs that would be tested is also important. And I think the updating the anti-discrimination language is important as well. So I guess our concern is the impact of the increasing cost of the contracts and sustainability. It's also, you know, the question is often asked, particularly with binding arbitration, you know, can the city afford this? And the answer is yes, the city can afford this, but it comes at a price. And the price is that there are demands on the city's spending. We're aggressive as we need to be, we being the city, for pension costs. State assessments are going up, debt service is going up, health insurance is going up. And so with these more expensive contracts, it's looking at the impact of what does this mean on other departments that may be less of a priority, but still important. So we took a look at the last 5 years, so from fiscal 14 to fiscal 19. So it's actual for the first 4 years, and fiscal 19 is still budget. But looking at the top 3 departments of police, fire, schools, spending in those, personnel spending in those 3 departments increased by basically 19%. We then looked at the next 8 larger departments, and that spending increased by 9.9%. So we're seeing, you know, that there's less of an increase in other departments once you get past sort of the big 3. We've also looked at personnel levels and the change in personnel levels. And with the 3 departments, the 3 big departments, over a 15-year period from fiscal 2003 to fiscal 2018, there was an increase of 397 positions in those three departments, or a 3% increase. In those 8 departments, we actually saw a decrease in personnel levels. And overall, all departmental, basically an increase of only about 1.4%. So over time, and we've said this before, but what we're seeing is that because of the squeeze of the dollars, even though the city is in a very good financial position and did end the year and has ended every year with a surplus, we're seeing less resources, or less of an increase in resources for several other departments, which is also reflecting in the fact that the personnel levels in those departments are growing much less than the other, the larger departments, and particularly the big 3. So I will end with then just the concern about sustainability. Boston has been very fortunate in terms of new development in the city. And in fact, over the last 5 years, new growth has represented a larger increase in the property tax levy than the base 2.5% increase authorized by Proposition 2.5. And in fact, the last 2 years, fiscal 17 and fiscal 18, and we'll find out this month about fiscal 19, new growth has represented over 60% of the total increase in the levy. So obviously, after 5 years of that kind of dramatic growth, there's the question of how much longer is this going to last? And all indications at this point in time is it's not going to change for the next couple of years. But in fiscal 18, that new growth number was $77 million. If I just go back to fiscal 13, it was $28 million. So someday there will be that downturn, and so the question will be, can the city sustain the contract costs that that have been negotiated and accepted now? And that's an issue I think the city council needs to be looking at, and not just say, well, the administration and the firefighters agree to the contract, so we'll just support it. And I know it's not that simplistic, but these are concerns. So if, we're not here to say there's a red light, you got to really have a real carefully think about whether you want to approve this contract. You're going to approve the contract, and we're not opposing that. But, we're want to be a flashing yellow light to say, be careful. And this isn't going to last forever, and we need to prepare for that.
Okay.
So.
Thank you, Sam. Anybody else wish to provide public testimony at this point? Oh, President, yeah, sure.
Well, I just wanted
Counselor
to,
Campbell.
thank you. I just wanted to thank Sam and say, speak on behalf of the council. I think, we obviously take those responsibilities very seriously, and are thinking about the very things that you're talking about, sustainability. That's our primary job, right, when looking at the budget. So I don't think anyone supports it just because the administration and the bargaining unit were able to negotiate at the table and it didn't go to arbitration, so then it comes to us just automatically for a vote. I think each of us who spoke today, at least those who voiced that they were going to vote in the affirmative, reviewed it, had conversations where appropriate and legally appropriate, and then made a decision based on looking at a ton of information. But I do think, what is helpful, where the Municipal Research Bureau can continue to be helpful to us, is having more conversations outside of just one contract, but the bigger picture. I think it's something we continue to talk about. But I just wanted to quickly say, I think no one takes those responsibilities lightly, or just feels as though they have to approve this contract because it was worked out by the administration and the bargaining unit. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And let me also add my concern about when we as a body introduce new measures, maybe getting into new areas of governance or bureaucracy without actually putting a cost to those policy changes. I'm all about basic city services, protecting our citizens. That's where our investments should be going, public education, public safety, and basic city services. And a lot of the other stuff that sometimes we get in talking about requires bureaucrats, basically, to look at reports and monitor this and monitor that. And I believe we have a huge oversight responsibility, but first and foremost is public safety, protecting our citizens. So every investment we make in public safety, because we have the best public safety, I believe, in the entire country, for our firefighters, our police officers, and our EMS workers, are second to none, and I will always support those investments all day long. So, anybody else? Councilor McCarthy.
I have a brief clarification. You know, we've talked about new growth, and I see Richie's in the wings ready to sit down. So, you know, we keep talking about new growth, and you had mentioned the details. Details 4 hours, mandatory 8 if you go to 401. My understanding is that they're paid by the contractor, and not only are they paid by the contractor, but the city gets 10% back of what is spent. So I just want to clarify that at some point in time.
If I may, I mean, that is true. That it's a cost, and I didn't say it was a cost to the city. I said it was a cost to the taxpayers, but it does become a cost to the city if the companies that are required and have hired pay detail don't pay. I mean, there's been situations where there's been an accumulated deficit that the city has ended up having to fund itself. So it's not always paid by, outside businesses.
What do you mean they don't pay?
Well, a company could go out of business, and so they don't pay.
No, okay.
But in my time, there have been a couple of times where the city has had to absorb some of the deficit and basically provide the funds to the firefighters because the outside funding didn't materialize.
Right. Well, with that, sure, Rich Paris, President, Local 718.
How much money could that possibly be? Companies,
Yeah, I know.
Chairman, I wasn't going to get up and speak today, but I can't help myself. Thank you very much. I appreciate you listening to us today. All the councilors that came in, you're concerned about firefighters and public safety in the city of Boston for your citizens, and you care about the safety of our firefighters. And I just want to thank my bargaining team and my executive board and the men and women that are sitting behind me right now that work holidays, nights, Thanksgiving Eve and Christmas Eve, and day in and day out. And when there's a call, they go balls to the wall, and they care about the citizens of the city of Boston. You can't put a price tag on that. You couldn't put a price tag on Michael Kennedy and Eddie Walsh. That's what paid details are trying to prevent, too. And thank you, Councilor McCarthy, for bringing that 10% up. That was on my notes, so you helped me there. But in the last administration, I know the administration spent over $3 million on an arbitration case. This administration, our bargaining team and executive board has sat down and done a deal. We haven't gone to arbitration. Yeah, we had disagreements back and forth, but we took care of business. And that's important. And that's what bargaining is about. Throughout this state, it's joint labor management. Everybody's going to arbitration now. And what good is that? Sit down at the table, do the deal. It saves the city and the firefighting unions, or the police unions, money. I just want to say in the health insurance, that's a separate incident. In PEC, we meet once a month with the city. Coalition bargaining that we did to keep us out of GIC and the city and all the unions sit down once a month, and they do a great job. Where a year from now, we'll be going in for a new deal. But I just want to thank all the councilors that showed up today. I appreciate it. You're concerned about us. And from myself and all the members that are sitting behind me and the guys and women that are in the firehouse today working, they thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rich. And Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to all of you, and a happy, safe, and healthy New Year. This hearing's adjourned.